Please welcome today's senior speaker, Sam Steinmetz.
There's a certain elegance to it. Eyes jolting open, a boorish slide from under the covers, a tiptoe reaction to the particularly cold wooden floor, and a stumbling walk to the other side of the room where a phone, strategically placed from the night before, lay buzzing with the sound of my alarm. See, in the beginning of junior year, I was a morning person, someone who self-identified as a morning go-getter, who would create habits and routines surrounding this identity. And indeed, for a long while, I became committed to this idea of myself creating, in a sense, absurd morning wake-up habits that I believed would change me for the better. However, this running ambition of mine failed. Quickly, though, let me explain how and why I failed. Every night before I went to bed, I would place my shoes and workout clothes on the ground in between my bed and my phone. My phone I set far away so I wouldn't have the ability to snooze that alarm so easily. Logically, I thought that as I rose in the morning, with instincts to remove the cacophony of bad music coming from my phone, I would trip over or brush upon my shoes, which would do enough to wake me up from that walking haze. So again, get up from my bed, trip over my shoes, and be active and ready for the rest of the day. This was my goal, and although it worked for a few weeks, soon, every morning, I was turning into something more or less like a sleeping zombie ninja who could avoid the shoes and the clothes and the occasional chairs and crush the snooze button and land back in bed with just a hop and a step. This failure represents the end of a periodic ambition in my life. Though I certainly believed that my goal of becoming a morning person wasn't just a goal, and was instead a new persona of mine, I failed, and for better or worse, I moved on. I have a lot of these quick ambitions in my life. Whether it was a lifestyle change, a game, or any other activity, I would become so interested in that subject that I would not let it get off my mind, and eventually it would become a different phase of mine. Ambitions like these usually start out with some sort of engaging and captivating content, whether it was a book, a podcast, a TV show, or even a deep and motivating conversation. My interest would spark, and I would instantly develop an appetite for gaining more knowledge or engagement in whatever activity I intended to pursue. This usually was followed by a consistent participation in engaging in this interest, or its replacement with a newer one. Before, I wanted to be a morning person, but prior to that, I had many other periodic interests. To name a few of those interests, I was a big fan of baggy t-shirts, peppermint tea, investing in options, which is a terrible, terrible idea. Never do that. Communism, and yes, and to cap that all off, the TV show Silicon Valley. All of these were phases of my life, some longer than others, some more immersive, and some certainly more regrettable than the rest. And like a box of chocolates, I never knew what I was going to get. What was the next thing to inspire me? Or how long would this phase of my life last? I never knew what my next step would be, but that was simply the nature of the phase. These displays of my ambitions may match your idea of my personality. However, as of now, none is more associated with my personality than the beanie. Now, raise your hand if you've ever seen me at school wearing a beanie. It's a lot. For nearly 2 months, I have adopted a habit of continuously wearing a beanie. Maybe you saw me with a yellow one or a gray one, but regardless of the color, I have consistently had something covering about 1/4 of my hair. To many of you, a beanie is just a hat. And, of course, it is just a hat. However, as ridiculous as it sounds, the beanie represented a new persona or phase of mine. With the beanie, I was someone who intended to take life and the rest of my fleeting Gilman career one day at a time, enjoying as much as I had left. With the beanie, I became a more relaxed person, and again, I was just enjoying the ride. While Gilman, and more specifically Mr. Hubeck and Mr. Smith, have not been the utmost supporters of my beanie-wearing self, rightfully so, Gilman's community has supported most of my variety of changing interests and ambitions. Though with pride and passion I take a stand with my beliefs and personality, expressions like that are not always to be taken for granted. And though different beliefs and interests of mine may have taken criticism for its deviation away from the standard, I can always remain confident that this community will always allow for these differences. Furthermore, the teachers at Gilman are proud to showcase their interests even if they veer away from the lesson plan. I can recall an hour-long conversation in lieu of third period that I had with Mr. Fitzgibbons about the overconsumption of meat in the United States. This conversation has given me clear evidence into how my aspiration for any periodic interest of mine is supported. Even though waking up at 4:30 in the morning is really just not very fun, and discussions about overconsumption of meat sometimes really messes up my appetite for chicken tendy lunch, these different phases in my life have shaped who I am and have driven my ambition for learning, all of which have been supported by the Gilman community. If I were to talk to my freshman self, that small, bug-eyed Sam with a chip on his shoulder, a heart on his sleeve, and the world in his eyes, I would say that my biggest advice is to tend to your studies, explore your interests, and follow that rabbit hole. For Gilman is your best chance to find an encouraging community, and you might even develop a long-standing passion along the way. Thank you for your time.